Texas Lutheran University.
I'd like to thank you all for coming to the second in our lecture series connected with the course Democracies in Crisis that I'm teaching together with Jermaine Walsh. So our first guest speaker spoke on Czechoslovakia, and our second speaker is an expert on Hungary. She has a very she's a very interesting life story. I can't tell it all but she fled. She participated in the Hungarian Revolution in 1956, and she was telling me earlier today that she I guess she was I'm going to get this wrong, but sort of it wasn't the propaganda, but it was the sort of publicity. And they used her typewriter to write up the sort of the resistance account of what was going on. She was working with this person, a person who was executed basically together with Economist at the time of when the revolution was put down. So she had to leave Hungary, and she left Hungary, I guess, in December of 1956. From there, she went to Canada. She was a college student in 1956. She went to Canada, where she basically had to start all over. She didn't speak any English. She had to start all over going to college. She went to college, got a college degree in Canada, and then she ended up going to Yale, where she got a PhD in, was it in history or in Eastern, or I think it was history or European Russian studies, and something with Europe. So one of those Eastern European, and then she ended up staying there, teaching, and I guess for a while was the Dean of Morse College. But the thing that really makes her, famous, okay, and why we all know her, is that she writes a blog. I mean, this is what's just amazing story. She writes a daily English language blog called Hungarian Spectrum. And everybody who follows Hungary knows about this blog. You meet someone and say, oh yeah, I read about that on Eva Balogh's blog. Okay, I was just in they all read it all the diplomatic corps read it in Budapest. I was in Poland earlier at this OSCE meeting, and I asked Eva to post this report that we'd written on her blog. Immediately, it was timed perfectly with the presentation, and I had several people, oh yeah, I just saw that on Eva Balogh's blog. People in the State Department who work on Hungary always read it. Anyone who does anything connected to Hungary reads Eva Balogh. Everyone knows about it, and Eva knows just about everybody in Hungary. Who's anybody? All the important people. And so it's just really, it's kind of an amazing story that this blog it fills a really important service in informing people about Hungary who wouldn't have access really to the country of daily information in English. She sorts through all the news, and she gives basically a little short article every day. So that's how I know her, and that's why we invited her down here to talk about Hungary. And her talk tonight then is, I forgot the title, I'm obviously not even pretending. She's going to talk about Hungary and the rise of illiberalism in Hungary. I'll let her share the exact title with you, and I'll pass it over to Eva before I make any more mistakes. Thank you very much. I'm really happy to see you.
I will fix it. I actually got an MA in Russian history and European studies, and then I got a PhD in history. Okay, Russian history European program was in the discipline. We did a little economics and a little political science and a little literature. I don't know. I am not 100% sure whether that kind of discipline program is the best, but it was okay. First of all, I want to thank you for all coming here, and spending an evening, which I'm pretty sure you can spend better, to hear something about a country whose reputation is terribly tarnished, has been tarnished in the last few years. This is very good for the blog. The worse the news, the more readers. So, but unfortunately, I wish it were the case. Also, I am hoping that I am not going to burden everybody with every bit of detail. You know how it is when you know something, quite a bit of something about the topic, you can get sidetracked and get involved in all sorts of small matters which no one is interested in. I had a professor, as a graduate student, and he wasn't the best lecturer, put it that way, and he told me that as a young assistant professor, he was assigned to teach European history, you know, from fall of the Roman Empire to Hitler. And he knew darn little about all this because his field was 20th century East European history. But he said it was his best course because he hardly knew more than what was in the textbook, and he couldn't get too confused. So I'm just hoping that I am not going to get too confused. Let me start again with a kind of a personal story. It was in December 1993 that I first went back to Hungary after the regime change. And at that point I was involved with all sorts of other things and I wasn't paying very much attention to Hungary. And moreover, I mean, if you just read the New York Times, you know, you couldn't learn anything about Hungary. So I was pretty ignorant. And I really thought that, oh, the Hungarians, they must be thrilled. Democracy has arrived, and everybody is so happy. And I got there, and I was astounded. Everybody hated the government. Everybody thought that life was terrible. The situation was awful. They wished they never wanted democracy. 1.5 million people unemployed, and it was just a dreadful situation. So it was so bad, and the government was so, I think it wasn't the best government, but it wasn't as bad as all that, but the situation was so bad that any government who was in power was going to fall and miserably. And just to give you an idea how miserably they fared 40 years later, in 1990 they had 43% of the votes, and in 1994, 9.8%. The party practically collapsed. And the socialists, who in 1990 maybe had 10%, ended up with 54%, absolute majority. And everybody was astounded. The communists are coming back. My God, you know, how did that happen? So, one thing is sure, one problem was what Hungarians usually call the democracy deficit. And we will talk about that a little bit later. The fact is that Hungary has never really had a democratic regime. Doesn't matter how far you go, it was always somewhat of an autocratic government. So just to give you a story about how indifferent people were to the very idea of democracy. I got there and I was talking about people I knew and some relatives and so on. And I was trying to explain to them all the wonderful benefits of democracy. And they didn't seem to be impressed. And I was desperate. I was trying to said, no, all right, let's assume that you wanted to start a party. And his husband of a relationship, a relation of mine, said that he was a doctor. He said, but I didn't want to. Okay? That was the end of that. I didn't get very far. So, one problem was, I guess, that Hungary didn't have it that bad before 1990. That was a time when people were talking about goulash, communism. And people did pretty well. They were satisfied. They felt extremely secure. They didn't have to worry that tomorrow they are not going to have a job. They were not rich, but every year life was getting a little better. A lot of people were building weekend houses. Everybody had, whether they needed or not, they had a little house somewhere in the countryside. So they were fine, and they were very proud of themselves. They looked at Czechoslovakia, pretty miserable place. Oh, Romania, really awful. Poland, I mean, there are empty stores. But here we are doing okay, because we are smart. And smart, and Kaldar is a clever guy. He kind of managed to have an understanding with the Soviets. He got so much out of them as you possibly get. He's a smart guy. He was very popular. And so they felt that they are superior to the others, and that it will go on like this. And instead of that, just the opposite happened. Eventually, all the other countries were moving on, and Hungary was not doing well economically. Not at all. Mostly because each government wanted to be popular and be elected, and the Hungarian public wanted so badly to have economic progress. They kept promising them, oh, things are going to get better, things are going to get better. But of course, they couldn't get better because the economy wasn't really functioning properly. So it was a great disappointment for the Hungarians. It wasn't a feeling of joy, and they thought, well, there will be a change, a regime change. Soon enough, we will be as rich as Austria. And when that, of course, didn't come, then the disappointment came with it. So when they went to Austria, and they saw how much better things are there, and when disappointment came, then he got more and more disappointed in the whole thing. So here we are, 25 years later, 72% of Hungarians say that they were better off before 1990 than now. Now, if you compare that, in Poland, it's only 35%, and even Ukraine, it's only 60%. So that gives you an idea how disappointed Hungarians are with regime change. The other thing was that everybody told them that, well, in 10 years' time, 15 years, 25 years, they are going to catch up. Well, they are not catching up. Just to again give you some comparisons, Hungary's GDP per capita is only $12,021. Slovakia, $15,893. Poland, 13,760, and Austria, 46,640. They are that behind. And in Poland, things were going so well in the 90s that every year there was a 5% economic growth. They called it the soaring eagle, I think, called the soaring eagle. And so here is a nation who felt they were superior. Suddenly, not only they are not superior, but falling behind. The Slovaks are better off than we are. I mean, how can that be? I mean, we always felt superior to the Slovaks. And they don't quite understand how it all could happen like this. So my feeling is that unless there is marked improvement in living standards, the situation is not going to change. Democracy is not going to be any more popular because they have to deliver. I mean, you know, it's not enough to say nice things and democracy and all that, and people are very poor and miserable, and they don't see any improvement in their lives. Now, since Hungary has joined the EU, incredible amounts of money go there from Brussels. 4 to 5% of GDP comes from Brussels. And with a 2.7% economic growth right now, obviously they are not using that money well. I mean, if 4 or 5% of GDP and you end up with 2.7% growth, well, let's face it, that's miserable performance. It seems to me that they are using this money for kind of frivolous things, like every town has to have a new square, or the square has to be, the main square has to be fixed up in some way, and very fancy stones have to be put down. Or some castle has to be fixed up, or something like that. So one problem is the bad economic performance and the hopelessness that things are going to change. So as a result, believe it or not, 500,000 Hungarians are now abroad, working abroad. 500,000. Mostly in the UK, but many in Germany. And I don't think too many will be coming back either. They are fed up. They don't like what is going on. And they feel that to succeed in Hungary is practically impossible, that you have to have connections, you have to have some relative who has a friend who then will get you a job and so on. So one problem is that the democracy itself is not something which they find so compelling that it is worth actually working for it or doing anything about it. That's one problem. The other problem is, of course, the way politics have developed over the years. The two sides, the right and the left, it's impossible to have any compromise solution between the two groups. And it's mostly, I must say, mostly the fault of the right, of Orban's, Viktor Orban's personality. He's a warlike character. he feels best when he has an enemy. He can fight against and conquer, and it's always, his vocabulary is full of warlike terms. And the interesting thing is that I don't think Hungarians want any more always going against somebody, but he still has a rather large following, and his appeal is mostly extreme nationalism. It always works. It works. If you tell Hungarians that they are the greatest and they have to defend their national character, that's why, for example, they cannot have refugees coming in because we don't delude the present ethnic composition of the country. So we have, on the one hand, problem with democracy, or the feeling that democracy doesn't work, and second, a political culture which is not conducive to slow building of an economy and a political system. Now, we have to go and talk a little bit about the constitutional problem, because then we come to this magic two-thirds majority, you know. Everybody will tell you that Orban, of course, he's right, because after all, two-thirds, he has a two-thirds majority. So he can do anything. You know? He looks upon politics that it's a bloody fight, and once he has the majority, he can do anything he wants, and the minority opinion does not matter. And the two-thirds majority, this magic number, came about in the following way. The Constitution said that there are certain cardinal laws which are so important that you need two-thirds majority. But of course, they never thought that any one party will have two-thirds majority. They thought that with this there would be cooperation between the government and the opposition, and so on important issues, they will work together to get that two-thirds majority in order to make any amendments to these cardinal laws. And but it happened that there was two occasions in recent Hungarian history that there was a two-thirds government majority. The first one was in 1994, when the socialists had an absolute majority, and they decided that they will invite the liberals to form a government. And they invited the liberals, although they didn't need it because they had 54% of the vote, because they felt, they sensed it, that the West doesn't trust them, because these socialists were so-called reform communists, you know, who split off from the old Communist Party. And so in order to convince the West that they are actually a democratic party, they said, okay, if we have the liberals with us, and the liberals were always they were the opposition to the Kádár regime, the very few people who actually fought against the Kádár regime, then perhaps the West is going to trust us. And once they added up the votes, it was well over two-thirds. However, these guys were not like Viktor Orban, and they said, okay, well, we are going to make one exception. The Constitution cannot be changed with two-thirds. You have to have three-fourths. And so they were decent people, and in fact, they didn't touch the Constitution at all. However, once Orban got to 2/3, he simply abolished the 3/4 rule with a 2/3 majority, and that was that. So that's how we came to that very sad situation. So that's, well, the other thing, I think I want to talk a little bit about Victor Orban. I don't want to repeat myself because I'm talking to the kids this afternoon, and I said a lot about Orban. But he is a very aggressive person who there are all these stories about him that he just has to win, whether it's soccer, his mania is soccer, and he just wouldn't stop until he wins. And with that kind of, and if he has a so-called enemy, he just doesn't have opponents, he has enemies, and he has to kill them, basically. And he can ruin them. He's a very vengeful kind of a person. Once he decides to go after somebody, I can assure you that he will get them, especially now. He's so powerful that if he decides, he's basically by now an autocrat. Whatever happens is what he wants. And he has no opposition either inside of the party or outside, because his opponents are ruined. He managed to ruin them, completely ruin them. Kind of character assassination. He's very good at that. And he kept hammering and hammering and hammering. The only politician on the other side who could have unseated him, completely ruined him by calling him a liar. And he's not a very nice person. I always ask people who knew him then, was he always like this? And well, opinion, some people say, no, he was a good guy. He was a good guy. He just, power went into his, fall into his head. I just don't believe that. People don't change that much. Well, other people say, well, he was always terribly aggressive. And he's just, it's very difficult to tell exactly, but he's a very complex character. Well, maybe he's not even that complex. He's just vengeful and manipulative. Plays one person against the other. Manages to remain on top by now, even within the party, even among his old friends. He's supreme. Whatever he says goes. I don't think there are any discussions. He decides, and the decision stays. And by now, he thinks that he knows everything. He's almost like Stalin, Stalin knew that, oh well, linguistics, he was an expert. Biology, he was an expert. Well, he thinks that he's the ultimate on every issue, whether it's arts, languages, policy. I don't think he listens to anyone. And I think by now he thinks that he's omnipotent. He can never make a bad decision. And I must say he's very lucky. He has been doing just okay. Every time his popularity goes down, something happens, and his popularity keeps going back. The latest is in October, November, he was in terrible shape, and then the migrants came. I mean, it was a blessing in disguise. He managed to incite the population, which was always somewhat xenophobic, He put out huge posters and told them that they are going to take your job. They did that in Hungary, of course. You cannot take our jobs, said that in Hungary, because it's all Arabs coming from Syria, new Hungarian. I mean, it was obviously for the Hungarians to sign them. And none of these migrants ever wanted to stay in Hungary. As soon as they arrived, within 24 hours they went. But he managed to rile up the people, and my God, he is not going to let anyone in. And in fact, he has been very successful. I think there are altogether maybe 600 people in Hungary right now, and it's completely sealed off, and people are very, very happy. But of course, these people are just going around Hungary, so Hungary has it good, but the others are burdened by all the, and he thinks that's a wonderful solution. Now, I don't know how long the European Union is going to put up with this one. He's just taking the money, and he's not doing anything to help the situation, which is pretty bad. Now, relations with the European Union. I don't think that he really ever wanted to be part of the European Union. He is not the kind of guy who would take any authority above himself to tell him what to do. And there are cases when he has to obey European rules. And he doesn't want to do that. He hates every moment of it. In fact, when the Hungarian parliament voted for joining the European Union, he just happened not to be there to vote. He's very good at crucial votes, he's just not there. So you cannot say he voted against it, you cannot say he voted for it, he was just not there. And first, and you mustn't forget that he was, he had the first Orban government was between 1998 and 2002. And at that point, Hungary was not part of the European Union. And he returns in 2010, and Hungary is under this terrible oppression of the Brussels bureaucrats. He called them the Brussels bureaucrats who don't know the world, they don't know anything about people, and they are just sit there and they are bureaucratically making all these laws about the shape of the banana or the English cucumbers, how straight it has to be. He usually brings that up as a terrible sign of the stupidity of the European Union. So, and he tried to fool the European Union right after he got into power. He won the elections in 2010. He tried to say that, at that point, I think the Hungarian national deficit, or the deficit, was something like 3.2% or something like that. And he went to Brussels and he said that the economy is in terrible shape, and he wants to extend he cannot go under 3%. Please allow us to be 6% or something like that. And Brussels told him, no way we are going to do that. And he was terribly upset because all his plans were, he was hoping to give money to his friends, and here he was, they crossed him. And from there on, his relationship with Brussels was ultra terrible. And I was always wondering how long they would put up with him. But they put up with him because I cannot do anything else. The European Union is incapable of, it's not a united Europe, it's not a United States of America type. You know, they don't have the power to do anything because there are so many prerogatives of the nation states that, moreover, they never thought, I think, that they would have a Viktor Orban inside of Europe and making all, you know, setting up practically an autocracy instead of saying, well, democratic values, what do you mean democratic values? He is, everything depends on him. And he's also extremely corrupt. Now, I don't even know how to explain that, but it's not just corruption. He's not the kind of corrupt guy that he has a huge wealth has accumulated great wealth. If he has, you can't see it. But he came to the conclusion that in order to remain in power, you need very powerful businessmen around you who is going to help you and to help your party. So he decided to create a strong Hungarian oligarchs, a group of them, and at the same time to get rid of foreign investors also. He announced that he's going to tax incredibly foreign banks. He is in the middle of trying to get rid of big chains, supermarket chains and others, and tax them, and to get rid of them basically, and then pass their stores and so on to his cronies, who then going to help the party and keeps nationalizing already privatized companies because they are so fed up with him that they keep saying, well, we just can't stand this. We have to leave, and if he wants to buy a gas company, well, buy the gas company. We are leaving. Bye-bye. And right now, we nationalize all the energy companies. And before that, he bought other companies, this company, that company. And I don't even know where the money comes from, but he's buying like crazy. Now, the corruption business. Well, first of all, there has always been corruption. Nothing new. But the corruption since 2010 is absolutely incredible. I mean, those socialists were bumbling idiots in comparison. They were kind of small change guys. These guys are doing it absolutely wholesale. And I told the class how it works. They decided to make tobacco products a national monopoly. And they had one favor with a small local Hungarian tobacco company whom they decided to give concession of wholesale of tobacco products. And once he got to that, he had to turn in quite a bit of money to a new newspaper, which is supposed to be basically propaganda publication for the government. He had had to buy a 49% stake in it. See, that was the price for getting the wholesale concession from the government. Or he gave concessions to a fellow called Andy Vojna, who was a Hollywood producer of Hungarian origin, Terminator and those kind of stuff. Great friend of all these big Hollywood types. And he got 5 casinos, and now he's obliged to buy a TV station where, again, it's going to be, it's a commercial station, but you see the news is the important stuff, and that will be another government propaganda machine. So this is how they have to pay him back for the goodies he gets from the government. And especially the casinos are really outrageous because there is a Hungarian company, a state company called cited. How would you translate it? Lottery. And it's a state lottery. And the state lottery company also applied for one of these casinos, but he rather gave it to Andy Vojna rather than the state-owned company. So he's taking money out of from the pocket of the state and gives it to this Vojna, who then somehow is going to trickle back the money for the propaganda TV. So it's incredible what is going on. Now comes liberalism. Yeah, that's also interesting. His party was a liberal party. In fact, almost like libertarian party and direct democracy type. They believed in kind of collective leadership. They discussed absolutely everything from themselves and so on. Well, once he realized that you can't really run a party like this successfully, he started tightening up, and eventually everything depended on him. All the appointments, all the people who stood as candidates for parliament had to be kind of checked out by him. Apparently already in 1994, he gave psychological tests to the members of parliament, whether they are royal types or whether they will talk, too independent. That he couldn't take that kind of thing. And I think the world, especially the United States, got the real gist of it, what Orban was all about when he last summer, not this summer, but the summer before that, he gave a speech in which he said that he is building a liberal democracy, liberal state. And I mean, everybody said, is that for real? In the middle of the European Union, he's going to build a liberal state. And they tried desperately kind of explain that this is not what he really meant. Because you see, liberalism in Hungarian doesn't mean the same thing as liberalism in English. That was the explanation. Which of course is a laugh. It means exactly the same thing. He realized that he went too far, but since he kind of bounced back, and he keeps saying, well, what I meant was neoliberalism I was talking about. Of course it wasn't. And then he tried to explain that, well, there is such thing as Christian democratic liberalism and other nonsense of that sort. Well, ever since then, I think people, the United States especially, is looking at him with says that the United States really cannot do anything. I mean, you know, they don't have, the only power, if it had power, which it doesn't, would be the European Union, who holds the purse string. But the American-Hungarian relations at the moment are terrible. I mean, at the bottom of the bottom. There are something like a list ye long, which they passed on to the Hungarian government to tell what the United States would like them to do. And with other things, stop the systemic corruption and prosecute people and convict people if necessary. That is what I expect, but I can assure you that nothing of the sort will happen. Mostly because the prosecutor's office is in their hands, has been, even when they were in opposition. They put a guy there during the first Orban administration who never brings any charges against. He has an insurance policy that nothing is going to happen to them, any of them. Doesn't matter what they do, as long as this guy is the chief prosecutor. He never sees any reason to prosecute. Then what? Prosecute for what? There's nothing wrong. Everything is just peachy pie. Also, he refuses to take any. He and history is a very problematic thing. You see, this government would like to have a kind of a predecessor they can look up to, and they can say, well, this is, you see, in Hungarian history, this is what we would like to imitate and follow, and the problem is that they cannot find a period in Hungarian history which is admirable, because certainly you cannot call the interwar period in Hungary admirable. I mean, it was an autocratic, authoritarian regime, anti-Semitic, ended up on the side of Hitler, helped Hitler deporting about 400,000 Hungarian Jews, and they all died in a few months. So there is nothing admirable about that. But they keep going back to this regime, trying to explain that actually it wasn't that bad. They keep rehabilitate people who politically were suspect, put it that way. Just lately, they wanted to, and I don't know whether it's still in the works or not, to have a statue of a Hungarian Minister of Education, who was the greatest anti-Semite you ever wanted to meet, who actually was responsible for many of the anti-Jewish laws. And at that point, the Jewish community was up in arms, and the Americans were up in arms, saying that it's impossible that they are going to raise a statue for this fellow. Well, I don't know where we are now on that. He's not the kind of guy who wants to hear no. He doesn't like people saying no. And there was a huge fight over another statue, kind of a woman, a dreadful looking memorial. It's the ugliest thing you ever want to see. And that was very controversial, because the statue has an archangel of some, Gabriel maybe, Gabriel, or Archangel Gabriel, with his flappers. And there is a huge eagle, I assume that's Germany, coming down on him over his head. And that was supposed to symbolize innocent Hungary being attacked by Nazi Germany. Well, that's not exactly how it was. And so the Jewish community was absolutely up in arms. Everybody wanted to stop this nonsense and forget about it, because this is falsification of history. And they complained and complained and complained. And one nice day, that night, in great secret, came Gabriel, Archangel Gabriel, and it's now right there, kind of across from the Soviet memorial, you know. So they want to prove that the Hungarian regime was completely innocent of siding with Germany, and had nothing to do with the deportation of Jews, which is outright lying. So that's a few things I wanted to say. So if maybe I have a couple of more things to say. The prospects for the future, yes. I am really a very, very optimistic person. In fact, people call me Pollyanna. But even I see that perhaps we are going to have Viktor Orban for a very long time. He has, I think the whole thing looks to me like a devilish plan, which has been planning for 8 years while in opposition and being very frustrated that once he gets into power, how he's going to fix everything to such an extent that there is no way of dismantling this new structure. And therefore, even if he disappeared tomorrow, it would be a hellish job. I don't even know how you would go about it to say, well, you know, if you want to be constitutional, you cannot say, all right, we will kick you out. Okay, you go wherever you go, maybe to jail. You cannot do that if you are a Democrat. You cannot do that. But then how do you get rid of people? He appointed people for 9, 10, 11, 15 years to death, you know. What are you going to do? You cannot turn them out of office. What are you going to do with the Constitutional Court, which originally had 9 people and now I think it has 15 people. He stuffed it with his own people. You cannot say, well, guys, find some other job. You cannot do that. You are stuck with them. So even the opposition, which if it were stronger, which it is not, they would be stranded with this mess of constitutional, I don't even know, this whole setup which there is no resemblance to a democratic structure. And what are you going to do with it? It would be, first of all, you would need a 2/3 majority to change everything. Well, how are you going to do that? By the way, the 2/3 of the majority, I just want to make sure that you don't think that 2/3 of the people actually voted for them. No, they, in 2010, they had 52% of the votes, which translated in parliament to 2/3 of the seats. And by 2014, he managed to get that 2/3 by 46% of the votes, because of the clever manipulation with the electoral course, he also passed a new electoral law, which, you know, decent governments say, all right, let's change the law only after I am no longer in power. You know, that would be the fair thing to do. But no, they fixed without asking anyone, they put through the new electoral law, which favored them so terribly that, as I told you, 40-some% of the votes they managed to get instead of the majority in Parliament. So it's almost impossible to get rid of. So I think, I heard him saying earlier that he said that once, you have to win only once, but then big. Because he knew that once he wins big and he has the piece of majority, no one is going to move him from that position for a while. And he said, well, if one of his underlings said a few years back, on the slip of the tongue, said, if we get the Hungarians from Romania to vote in the Hungarian elections, we will be in power for 25 years. And indeed, 98% of Hungarians who were allowed now to vote in the national elections voted for Fidesz in 2014, and it was the first time that they could vote in the national elections. Well, some people resent that greatly because they say they don't have to, they have no responsibility for whatever is going on in this country. They have a say, which they don't have to eat what they cook, you know, and so 98%, and moreover, the foreign vote is counted in such a way that it's most likely can be cheated with very, very easy. So the whole thing is pretty hopeless. So even Pollyanna can't be terribly optimistic about the future. So that's what we are. Not very bright future. Okay. Would you like to ask questions? Yes.
I was in Hungary in 1993.
Oh, same time around.
And of course, this is my first visit. My impression was that it was a beautiful country. People were very optimistic at that time. We were doing economic consulting there. But the other large impression was that people just didn't know what to do. There really was no sense of, well, we've been directed, our economy's been directed, now what do we do? There really wasn't much of an entrepreneurial mindset there. So I guess the question I asked is, why did Poland do so well in the 90s, and then Hungary did not? Because Hungary seemed to have a lot going for it.
Wasn't Poland the one which had the shock therapy, which was a very abrupt change instead of gradual, and perhaps a kind of give a fast start to the whole process. I don't know. The problem was that the first government, the prime minister, whose name was József Antal, wouldn't have any of the old diplomats or staff or from the older regime, the ones who actually had some expertise. And these guys were beaten down. You know, they had no experience, administrative or diplomatic experience. So it was a kind of a bumbling lot. And that was problematic because the socialists had the manpower because they had experience, diplomatic experience and so on from the 80s. And, but I don't know, it seemed to me that they just didn't have the expertise to run a government. Well, maybe wrong, but that was my impression. Yes.
You said repeatedly that the EU can't fix this because it doesn't have any power. In your opinion, would it be better for the EU to reform in a way that it would have power to?
Of course.
Or would you say that it should worthless and should be?
No. I am a great believer in a united Europe, but what they need is a United States of Europe. Well, just think of the Confederation in American history and just think about it, how successful it was, okay? And eventually it was such a mess that they had to make it a federative state. Yes, it would need something like that, but don't forget there are 28 nation states in the European Union. And where it stands now, that most of the power is not in the center, but in the so-called European Council. And the European Council, right now, the president of the European Council is a fellow Pole. His name is Donald Tusk. And he used to be Prime Minister of Poland, and apparently was a very successful Prime Minister of Poland. But as someone said, he's not exportable, not easily exportable. So he doesn't, first of all, his English is not very good, and apparently he's kind of disarrayed and nothing gets done. And he's obviously not a strong enough character. And here are these 28 prime ministers make up the European Council. So you imagine. And until very recently, everything had to be passed unanimously. All right? Well, something might be good for Germany, certainly not good for Poland, and vice versa. And as long as the European Council is that strong, but lately they changed it somewhat, and now majority vote will do, and they voted actually Orban and some of the smaller Eastern European states down on some issues. And I think they would like to go more and more in that direction, but of course there will be incredible resistance on the part of nation prime ministers, who of course they are dead against strengthening the center, because that means less power to themselves. Yes?
Orban sounds a lot like Putin to me, and I wonder if the two have any kind of relationship.
Oh, very good
They
relationship.
admire
They like each other. In Hungary, they call Orban the pocket Putin. Okay? Yes, they understand each other very nicely. Yeah. Yes.
Going along with that, I just read something today described Orban as Mussolini without the fascism. So do you think that is accurate? And also, does he have any kind of ideology except anti-liberalism? If that's an
No, well, he changes. He has no ideology. It just depends on what is the best for him on that particular day. Fascism. I don't think we are terribly off when we're talking about fascism. There are very, very many aspects of the Orban setup which reminds me of fascism very much. They had, instead of having parties, they had these professional organizations, and he does the same thing. He wants to get rid of European unions, which are not very strong in the first place. And he forces people into these associations, like all teachers must belong to the association, professional association of teachers. And he wwants them to sign a ethical code. And if someone doesn't abide by this ethical code, of course it has patriotism and this kind of thing in it, then he can lose his job. And once you lose your job, you cannot you cannot teach anywhere else in the whole country because the whole thing is centralized. The teachers are up in arms. And they also, the teachers have so little power by now that they can hardly decide what to teach and how to teach. Everything is told what they have to do, and everybody has to learn the same thing. And, teachers could pick textbooks. They lowered the number of textbooks. The textbooks are now published by the state instead of private crowdfundings. There is a very fascism. There was a little Hungarian who wasn't so little. His name was Balogh. He was a prime minister in the early 30s. Luckily, he died a few years later because his idea was to make Hungary a fascist state, but he died before he could do that. And if you read his program and you compare it to Orban's ideas, there's a very strong resemblance. So it's not a far-fetched notion. Fascism is not, fascism is, it has been used wrong. The term was used wrong very often, especially communist states. They come talking about that, German fascism. Fascists are different from National Socialism. But yeah, there is a resemblance.
Actually, just to follow up on that, one of the defining characteristics of fascism is militarism. Is there any reason militarism?
No. In fact, the military has, it's a joke. Outright joke. Yeah. Maybe they have 40,000. Something like that. But when it was question of having soldiers down at the fence in Serbia, and so they could gather only 4,000 or 5,000 soldiers. The other ones are all sitting at desks, Yeah?
Yeah, I have a question. Just thinking about your response in terms of the EU,
Mm-hmm.
and just from my understanding of what's going on in the EU, it seems so unlikely, at least in the foreseeable future, that the EU will move to more centralized. Might it be, at least in Hungary, might it be preferable to kick it out? Could they
I don't think they
they
can do
cut
it.
off its money?
There is
do
no
something?
mechanism to pick it up. Because it never occurred to them that there would be a Viktor Orban who once is in the Union would want to build a fascist state. That never occurred to them. And so there is no mechanism. There is something called the Article 7 in the Constitution, which says that you are a really, really bad boy and you are not, do not do what we consider to be European values, then we can suspend your voting rights. But it's called the atomic solution. It has never been used. And people are hoping that at least they will suspend Orban's voting rights, voting at his European Council.
Any more questions? Yes. You have been a revolt in Hungary. Is it possible for another revolt in order to get rid of the other?
Not at the moment. There might come, you see, if suddenly 500,000 people the streets of Budapest and made an awful lot of noise, perhaps there would be a way to force him to resign, but it would have to be sustained move against him on the streets or something like that for him to say, all right, he would never resign on his own unless you dump him somehow. But at the moment, the opposition is really hopeless.
So there's one more question. There's one more question. Otherwise, you have a question. Right. Okay. In that case, then I guess that we're done. But thanks very much.
Students at TLU engage in high-impact educational experiences that include civic engagement, aesthetic expression, critical thinking, and a focus on intercultural knowledge in a community that welcomes the interplay of faith and reason.